Hi, I'm Kat and today I have for you a word in Romanian and also a true crime case, Halloween inspired. So let's start with the word. For today the word for you is mască. 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 Well done guys, you just said mask. Dressed in a mask inspired by the horror movie Scream and armed with a shotgun, a 46-year-old psychotherapist had the intention to kill the lover of her ex-boyfriend, but it soon went very wrong. Not that the intention was not wrong to begin with, but you know, you get what I mean. So, let's find out more about Hell's Angel and who was it after being unmasked. Heather Stevenson Snell was born in Malta on December 2nd, 1957 to British parents. Her father was in the armed forces and in 1964 her family moved to Canada. When she was 13 years old, she returned to England, at first attending a boarding school in Kent before the family moved to Scarborough. There she went to a school in the town, earning 5 GCSEs. She didn't take further education, instead taking a job working in a garage. She would go on to work in a Scarborough bookshop where she met her husband, Leo Snell. They were married in 1978 and a year later she gave birth to a son, which they named Solomon. They moved to Penrith in Cumbria where they opened a gallery and bookshop, but the marriage was an unhappy marriage and they ended up divorcing in 1983. Heather remained in Penrith and went back to studying. She studied Introduction to Social Sciences with the Open University. In 1987, she went to the University of York to study for a BSc in psychology. After graduating in 1990, she took a postgraduate course before opening the York Psychotherapy Clinic in 1991. The business then relocated to Crombie Avenue in 2000. The property at Crombie Avenue looked like a fortress with barbed wire and 6-foot-high gates. The property also housed a collection of knives, swords and guns. On the outside, Heather was a respectable woman, running a psychotherapy business which aimed to help people come to terms with their inner demons. But ironically, Heather was unable to use her own skills to help herself. The York Psychotherapy Clinic had been Heather's work for 13 years. She trained informally at night classes in York and she was registered with the National Council of Psychotherapists, but not the official UK Council for Psychotherapy. On websites highlighting National Council services, Heather was described as specializing in counseling and assessment as well as college supervision and training. Heather was a keen motorcyclist and attended rallies throughout the region. She owned a number of bikes and ran an all-female motorcycle club called Stuff the Ironing. Heather had also taken shooting lessons at the York shooting range, where she learned to fire a shotgun. According to Philip Thompson, the owner of the North of England Activity Centre in Rufford, near York, revealed later that Heather took a series of clay pigeon shooting lessons at the Tinker Lane-based centre in early 2003. She had 4 half-hour lessons learning how to handle and fire a shotgun. Anyone can go in and book a lesson, and that's what Heather did as well. She seemed just like any other regular person, nothing unusual about her. She wasn't great at shooting, but you know, she wasn't bad either. Basically, the idea of this shooting activity is that you go there to learn how to shoot, of course. You learn how to handle a gun, about safety, about the etiquette on the shooting ground. Heather's instructor, Ken Whelan, said that Heather was a slow learner. She found the discipline quite hard to master. She learned with a gun known as over and under because of the double barrels being placed on top of the other. However, Heather was respectful and she was pleasant to staff. There are over 120,000 clay pigeon shooters in the UK. It's a challenging sport which requires concentration, but Heather would manipulate this Olympic competition popular sport for her evil intentions. Heather owned 2 dogs, Rottweilers, in her home in York, and she was looking for a dog sitter for when she was away, so she placed an ad and it was Adrian Sinclair who responded to the ad for a dog sitter. Adrian was a former stripper and they ended up having an affair. But the relationship soon ended when Heather traveled to New York on a psychology course. Growing increasingly alarmed by Heather's strange and obsessive behavior, Adrian decided to break up with her and move to Radcliffe. There, he began a relationship with Diane Lomax. They started the relationship in October 2002. Diane met him through mutual friends called Susan and Sean Portman. Adrian had recently left York, where he was the dog sitter of Heather's dogs. Diane and Adrian started their relationship as friends, but then things went to a more romantic nature, and Adrian moved into Diane's home on Holland Street. Heather felt hurt and she was deeply jealous. She became obsessed with Adrian and Diane and harassed them with phone calls and even death threats. Heather stalked Adrian for 18 months and caused absolute misery. She even sent Diane a Christmas card showing Adrian kissing a woman whose face was scratched from the surface of a photo. She would also call Diana a filthy prostitute. Adrian and Diana had to move to different places to live because of her, but she always found them. Heather would also constantly call police to report that Adrian had threatened to kill her, even to report the couple as pedophiles. Desperate for protection from Heather, Adrian turned to the police. But the police said that they couldn't do anything since they had no evidence to back Adrian's claims. Until she did something to him, the police couldn't help. Go figure. So you have to wait for something to happen before you help. Yeah, got it. This caused a strain in Adrian's relationship with Diana. He decided to give their relationship a break by moving into his friend's home, while Diana stayed back at their home in Radcliffe. For a while, the phone stopped ringing and everything felt normal again. The harassment finally stopped in spring 2003, which was around the same time that Heather took up those shooting lessons. A lot of exes will do obsessive kind of things, sometimes empty threats even, but Heather, she was being serious. She had planned the assassination of her love rival Diane in meticulous detail. She even put together a series of index cards to remind her what items she would need in order to carry out the murder, including an outline of her plan to frame her ex-boyfriend Adrian for the killing. She drove to Radcliffe, Manchester on Halloween night with the intention of killing Diane. But things went horribly wrong, and instead an innocent neighbor lost his life that Halloween night. Diane Lomax, referenced as Diana as well in articles, lived next door to Robert Wilkie at 59 Holland Street, Radcliffe. She had two sons, 5 and 8 years old at the time. She had lived on that street for many years. She knew Robert and Deborah O'Brien quite well. Robert helped fix one of Diane's children's bikes on more than one occasion. 43-year-old Robert, or Bob Wilkie, a former soldier, had just become engaged to his girlfriend of 10 months, Debbie O'Brien, 40 years old at the time, and had reconciled a long-standing disagreement with his brother, 47-year-old Billy. Bob and Billy had fallen out several years earlier but resolved their differences only 2 weeks before the tragic events of today's case. In his old-fashioned way, Bob went to Debbie's father to ask him for her hand in marriage. Bob was a wonderful, kind, loving partner, brother, and loyal friend to many. He was popular on the Holland Street he lived at with his partner Deborah for 10 years. He was born on 1st of December 1959. He had a flat of his own in Crompton Close, Radcliffe, but he rarely stayed there. He was athletically built and had been in the armed forces, where he was commando. He had also previously been a landlord, having run more than one public house. He was very affectionate to Deborah's 2 children, aged 14 and 9 at the time, and 2 children the couple had fostered. He was kind and caring and very generous. On the fateful day, he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He never met Heather, setting eyes on her for the first time only 2 minutes before his death. On Halloween night, 31st of October 2003, Heather turned up on the doorstep of Diane's home in Holland Street. You remember Diane, the partner of Heather's ex, Adrian? On this night, Heather wore the scream mask and she was covered from head to toe by a white sheet. So she knocked on Diane's door, but Diane didn't open. For weeks, Heather had plotted in detail how she would carry out the crime, finally choosing to shoot and kill Diane at her home on Halloween, the anniversary of her being dumped by Adrian. She meticulously planned her route to Radcliffe on index cards which gave specific directions and mileages to Holland Street and detailed what she should take with her and where. Part of her preparations included dressing in the ghost costume, beneath which she concealed a loaded sawn-off shotgun and covering her face with a terrifying scream mask before knocking on Diane's door at 12:40 a.m. But her plan went wrong when Diane, alarmed by the appearance of the figure she saw through the spy hole of her door, refused to open it. Bob, the neighbor, was about to go to bed with his partner Debbie O'Brien. As Heather kept knocking and shouting, causing a commotion late at night, Diane's neighbor Robert, or Bob, told Heather to quieten down as she banged furiously on the door. Bob didn't know it was Heather. Remember, she had the scream mask on. Bob just assumed that she was a teenager, playing a harmless prank. But when she continued her knocking, concerned about their 4 sleeping children, Bob went out into the street and decided to confront her. At this point, Diane also opened her front door and Bob demanded the figure remove her mask, but Heather refused. And Bob grabbed the mask, pulling it from her face, trying to find out who this person was. Diane then slammed her door and Heather fired the gun before making off. Heather raised the gun she had hidden and pulled the trigger, the shotgun cartridge blasting through the layers of her ghost outfit and into Bob's abdomen at point-blank range. He died on the pavement a short time later. Heather's face, injured by the recoil of the gun, fled in an all-untaxed car, leaving Bob dying on the pavement. 2 police officers spotted her car being driven too slowly on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Unaware of the murder, police pulled her over and then arrested her after spotting the shotgun and the blood-splattered ghost costume in the car. They also found a dagger hidden into her waistband and more knives. Shotgun ammunition owned by Heather was later also discovered. In a desperate bid to avoid being connected to the crime, Heather gave a series of false identities and claimed that the gun and knives officers found in the car belonged to a boyfriend. When her real identity was established, she then claimed that the gun belonged to her intended victim, Diane Lomax, and she wrestled it off her. This too was proven to be a lie when the only DNA found on the weapon belonged to Heather and Bob. In court, Heather continued claiming that the gun had gone off accidentally as Bob was attacking her. She eventually admitted that the index cards detailing her horrific plans were instructions for visiting Holland Street, after initially maintaining they were plans for attending a Halloween party. But the jury saw through her lies, and after they had found her guilty, psychiatric reports done on Heather while she was in custody revealed that she had a histrionic personality disorder. She was prone to self-dramatizations, exaggerated emotions, and she was manipulative. She told breathtaking lies in court and has shown no remorse. She was described as someone who sought out activities which would put her at the center of attention, an individual who was egotistical and self-indulgent. Mr. Justice Wakerly told her the attempted murder of Mrs. Lomax was one of the worst cases that has been before him. Heather was given a life sentence in September 2004 with a tariff of a minimum of 22 years behind bars before she could get parole. She was convicted by a jury at Manchester Crown Court of murdering the neighbor, 43-year-old Robert Wilkie, and the attempted murder of Diane Lomax. Mr. Justice Wakerly said, quote, "This crime was born of obsessional behavior. You knew perfectly well what you were doing, and there were innumerable occasions when you could have stood back from the course of action you were planning." End of quote. Since the murder, Diane and Adrian have separated. Diane moved away from Holland Street in July 2004, the following year, to pick up the pieces of her life. 17 years later, in 2019, Heather launched a bid to persuade the Court of Appeal to review her sentence on the grounds that her character is now radically different and she has made exceptional progress while behind bars. A single appeal judge rejected her bid, and when she renewed her application to the Court of Appeal in February this year, 3 appeal judges sitting together also rejected it. Announcing the court's decision, Lady Justice Maker said defense suggestions that lawyers could collect evidence in the UK and abroad to support her case were entirely speculative, and the application was 6,000 days too late. Appeals against sentences usually have to start within a month of the sentence being passed. And this is the story of Hell's Angel, the Scream Halloween killer, Heather Stevenson Snell. Please guys, do let me know what do you think about this case in the comment section down below. And with this, we are at the end of our Halloween series. Thank you so much for staying with me, and I hope you had as much fun watching as I had making these videos. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!